We're officially at a little past 2:30, so we're going to get started. I just want to thank all of you for coming to our panel. With metadata comes meta-responsibilities, using cataloging and metadata to make comics more accessible. We are just really excited to be here to talk about how our patrons find comics and how we can use the metadata they generate in order to kind of bounce it back at them and make what they're looking for more accessible. Before we introduce ourselves, we just, out of curiosity, are curious how many people in here are librarians? Yeah. And then, secondary question, how many of you catalog at your libraries? Awesome! So many catalogers here. How many of you are educators? Any educators? Wonderful. And then just fans who are here because they're interested. Awesome. Publisher. Wonderful. Awesome. Well, we're so excited that you all are here. I'm going to try sitting over here. I've been told the slide advancer doesn't work very well, so I might pop over. So first, we just want to introduce ourselves so you can know a little bit more about us. All right, I'm going to migrate over, I guess. All right, my name is Tracy Bain. I am the Sight and Sound Cataloger at the Austin Public Library in Austin, Texas. My favorite comic book character is She-Hulk, and about midway through my first game of D&D several years ago, I created a rogue who I discovered after about an hour was essentially Bandette, if any of you are Bandette fans. So comic by Paul Tobin and Colleen Cooper. I've been a cataloging librarian for 6 years and just love thinking about cataloging as tiny bridges that we make. And we bridge like wonder to knowledge. Someone wonders something, they look it up in our library catalog, and they gain knowledge. So it's just kind of my whole philosophy in cataloging. All right, Lawrence?
Hi, I'm Lawrence Brenner. I am a comics and pop culture historian. My first comics were actually the ElfQuest comics I discovered in my library, and I've been a lifelong fan of ElfQuest ever since. I work in the cataloging and capturing of history a lot. Oh. It turned off, did it? Did it turn? Oh, there it is. Hi, my name is Lawrence Brenner. I'm a comic book and pop culture historian. I work a lot in archiving and doing video work to capture important discussions and talks, as well as doing research in economics of fandom, as well as celebrations of fandom thereof through cosplay, fan art, and celebrations that connect people to each other.
Awesome, thank you. Karen?
Oh, hi. I'm Karen Green. I'm the curator for comics and cartoons at Columbia University, where I started the graphic novels collection in 2005 and the comics archives in 2010. And the comics archives coincidentally hold the Wendy and Richard Pini papers, creators of ElfQuest. So there you have it.
Thank you. And Deborah?
Hello, I'm Deborah Tomaris. I've been a cataloger for about 18 years, largely in public libraries, from the very big. I started actually here at NYPL, to the small public libraries in a consortium in Maine, and now academic. So I've seen a lot of different types of users coming in for graphics, and I'm really interested in metadata as a method of accessibility. Not the platonic ideal of cataloging, but how do we create connections so that people can find stuff and then find more stuff that they're interested in.
All right, so when we came up with this panel, we wanted to ask ourselves a few questions about how libraries interact with users in order to generate metadata, but also kind of doing a self-examination of the current practices of libraries and how we use metadata to describe comics. So our first question was, what are some of the strengths of comics metadata in libraries? So we kind of came up with 3 general topics. Vocabularies are growing. I believe most of us librarians use Library of Congress subject headings and genre form descriptions, which are essentially the kind of keywords our patrons use in order to find what they're looking for. We also have a huge ability to pair subject headings with genres to create robust searching. We'll go more of these in depth in the next few slides. And with growing vocabularies come more discoverability. All right, so as we can see, vocabularies when it comes to describing comics is ever growing. And I think, Deborah, you had kind of a nice, concise list of new genres that were added this year.
Interestingly, one of the fastest growing, sorry, this is what happens when you're short. Interestingly, one of the fastest growing areas of comics metadata related, or in libraries, is genre headings. And so genre headings related to comics have been sort of exploding, and within 2019 so far there have already been 10 new genres added to the vocabulary. Everything from medical comics to cyberpunk comics to social issue comics was one of the most recent ones. And it's the sort of thing where you can use these terms to bring together books that are on very disparate but related subjects. So an overarching genre like medical comics can bring together comics on a lot of different conditions, so you don't have to look up every single condition to find all the medical comics that you have in a particular collection.
But Deborah, isn't one of the, I mean, this is fabulous, don't get me wrong, but isn't one of the drawbacks is that these are headings that are used going forward, but that are rarely applied retroactively to existing cataloged materials?
Yes, and we will beat that horse to death in this panel discussion. Retroactive applications of new genres and subjects as they come in is really important to link new stuff to older stuff in the collection. Otherwise, you're giving users this sort of illusion that they're getting complete results, all of the lesbian comics that you own. But if you're not going back and tagging everything else that used to exist, the Hernandez brothers and Locus and things like that, then you are not giving users everything, and you're doing them really a disservice by not revisiting your material and your metadata. Pressure though that is.
And I think there's also an issue of adopting new genre terms, but then dropping the subject heading. We were just talking about, I was trying to explain to Calvin Reed what this panel was about. And I brought up as an example the difficulty of finding graphic medicine comics and how you heretofore have had to look up each individual illness with the phrase comic books as a subject. And I gave as an example Alzheimer's, and I saw that Paco Roca's Arrugas came up, but the English translation, wrinkles, did not. And when I looked up that record, I saw that it used the graphic novels genre heading, but it did not have comic books, comic strips, comic etc. anywhere in the subjects. So there you go.
And another, we're going to go over some of the issues that we have with library metadata in a little bit. But one thing that struck me too about the vocabularies are growing, but they're also splintering from fiction headings. So we're in a room full of librarians, and I'm going to mispronounce this because I only ever type it. But in the fiction world, we have Bildungsromans, which are coming-of-age stories. Mm-hmm. But for comics, we use coming-of-age comics. So there's also this splintering of genre headings, and it feels sort of, it makes it more difficult for patrons to, jump over from format to format, which I see as a pretty significant issue.
If I want to play devil's advocate, the one thing I would say, and this is of course condition on condition on condition, in a perfect bibliographic world, the strength of these vocabularies is that the term is standardized and that it's consistent.
Yes.
And so people don't have to look up all the different ways we would say medical comics. In a perfect world of medical comics, they would know that term, they could plug it in and get everything without having to say, is it graphic medicine? Is it graphic pathology? What are we going to put as the keyword on this? And so I think there are limitations, but I also think there are ways in which the vocabularies are strong and can be stronger if developed and used well. There's my point.
Well done.
I would also like to add a point, is that that's because where people, they may have a concept or think of it as a certain way, but not necessarily in the library standard. So as they learn things in the library standard, and that in and of itself gets shared, that allows for more standardization across things, as opposed to something like Brian Freeze's Mom's Cancer, for example, too, where it's where they look up award-winning graphic novels on graphic medicine or things like that, or dealing with the issues that are pertaining to illness in medical comics.
Right.
All right, So the next thing we want to talk about is grouping by subject and genre can lead to discoverability of new and related items. So you want to take this one?
Here's another perfect bibliographic world. So one could take a book about Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur and just put African American girls, comic book strips, etc., and then go away, right? The minimalist version of cataloging. But then you start to think, what might people who are looking for Moon Girl also be interested in? Maybe they want to read other books with African Americans in comics, like Luke Cage or Cyborg. Maybe they want to read more about African American women in comics, or Ironheart, that sort of thing. Maybe they just want women superheroes. And so if you link that up, you can get Superwoman, not Superwoman, dear God, Wonder Woman, pardon me. It's been a long day. But then you think, all the other connections we could make, you could go crazy with it. And so it's interesting exploring the ideas of how you can make more things discoverable for interested audiences.
Then the same thing here is, Moon Girl's superpower is her intelligence and things like that. And this can also lead into fun things about, women who also have dinosaur associates, such as Arsenic and Old Lace from Runaways.
And I just want to add, with Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur, this isn't user-generated metadata, but with all of the Disney Plus announcements coming out, and the Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur show that's going to be on Disney Plus, now we're going to have this whole new corporate metadata schema that Disney Plus will associate with Marvel entities. So we're going to have customers going, Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur is teenage superheroes. Oh. We don't have a heading for teenage superheroes. Or kid superheroes.
Right.
So that just adds, corporate metadata too, adds another layer of complexities. I know too for reference librarians. There's someone coming up to the reference desk stating, a phrase they had in their Netflix queue as a suggestion that isn't analogous to the library world. So just kind of things to think about. We're exposed to more and more metadata and search terms every day as consumers, and how we can translate that to the library world.
Something connected to that, Tracy, with the idea of kid superheroes or teen superheroes. In something like WorldCat, you might think, well, I can go in and change that audience limiter to juvenile or not juvenile. But the problem with that is that LC classes so many comics just because they're comics as juvenile. So that is a meaningless limiter, which is frustrating.
You also have the reverse, where comics with LGBTQ themes are always adult, always.
And that's another thing that actually is happening with certain aspects of search, depending on which country you're in and things like that, is certain topics will actually end up restricted even if they shouldn't be. And that can be a whole different thing. And that's also like certain things that can be denoted when you do things in like age restriction and stuff like that. Even if it's like, good intention, because you don't want to accidentally have the Deadpool version of Devil Dinosaur that exists. When you're just looking for, the original, or even some aspects of the Kirby Devil Dinosaur, when you're looking for, Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur and stuff like that, because, you got the originals.
Yeah. So we wanted to go a little more in depth about pairing subject headings and genres. So we have 4 medical comics up on the screen, and they each deal with their unique medical topics. But one of the things that I love about combining genres and subject is maybe someone who is looking for nonfiction titles is going to find something that they can relate to kind of in a more fictionalized world. It's always hard. Is it a graphic memoir? Is it instructional nonfiction? But being able to pair the subject headings and go, maybe you hadn't considered a comic or a graphic novel, I think is just a really powerful tool that we've developed in the last, 5 or 6 years?
They're pretty new.
And a lot of these things you also see with like different search. When you look things through like different search engines and also shopping systems, you'll see all sorts of different things happen when you look up for like different things. And sometimes the different ways you search for stuff will bring in new ways of thinking about for categorizing.
And I think the addition of faceted searching in a lot of library OPACs have really helped out. So, if you type in cancer, you're going to get fiction, nonfiction, graphic novels because it's just a keyword search, and then you can facet it down by format. I want a graphic novel, I I want a documentary, I want a book. So I think that has also been a very powerful tool.
Yes and no. Just,
Okay.
I mean, we use, what the hell do we use? We use something, Ex Libris, I think it is. We use Voyager, sorry, we use Voyager. So we've got the facets, and you've got the subject headings that show up as a facet, and you will find both the genre and the subject heading together. So there'll be, 32 results, and 17 of them are comic books, comic strips, comic, etc., and 4 of them are graphic novels. But if you choose both of those, then you're anding your search. And so you have to that will only give you things that have both of them. So you have to do these searches over and over again with various combinations. It's a hard life as a cataloger, but it's a hard life as a public services librarian.
Oh, yeah.
I've got to tell you.
Yeah.
Well, the bifurcation is a problem too,
Yeah,
isn't it? Right? Because
absolutely.
we can't just, as a cataloger who likes to hide in my office, we can't all just hide in the office. We have to keep talking about how
Yeah.
people are looking for things and how to make more accessibility happen.
Yes, communication with frontline staff and catalogers is always a good thing.
Yeah, I'm lucky. I have a dedicated comics cataloger.
Yeah.
And so we chat about things. But she is also operating within certain limits. She can't do everything that I want her to do.
Okay, so we're going to go into next. We already touched on some of these, but what are some of the because with everything, light and dark, it's very. If you're at lunch today, for every light side there's a dark side. So what are some of the difficulties of comics metadata in libraries? And the first topic we wanted to talk about was how difficult it is to expand and create user-friendly controlled vocabularies. So here we have the Sinestro Core and Space Opera comics just became a new heading, I think this year.
Yeah, space operas, comics.
That's wild.
Do most of your customers know what space operas are?
That seems
Exactly.
so granular.
Well, I was reflecting on it, and I think space opera has been used to describe saga since it came out. So I think it's maybe a more pervasive term in the comics industry or the comics fandom than I thought. But we have all of these granular languages, but how do we describe it? Communicate that.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, yeah, like sometimes people actually know the concept. Like most people who are coming in who know Star Wars in any way, shape, or form, or who have experienced it over time, have heard of the term space opera used with Star Wars, or from like the manga side, also coming in from some of the longer running space series or some of the well-known ones like Galaxy 999. But then it also becomes like that same way of it may or may not be something that they could realize, or that some of the librarians realize. Like I said in the notes for like Trigun, it actually describes itself as deep space future gun action, and it's also a Western.
And that's where you get another problem in the minimalist world, where someone might just slap superhero comics on it and be done, and not put all the genres that might be applicable and find things. Perhaps having all 3 of the ones up there would be the best way to get people access.
Well, and for a huge portion of readership, a superhero are people, not a genre.
Right.
So a superhero is a character, but you can have a superhero comic that isn't part of the big 2, and it's still applicable to a superhero comic. So again, like thinking on how your customer is searching for things. Yes, superhero, science fiction, fantasy, that triplet I see on record all the time. All right, so this one, I think we have a lot to talk about. We've already started. Library linger versus customer intuition. And so we have like Batwoman as an example. And Batwoman is a LGBTQ character, but according to the Library of Congress Genre Form Thesaurus, LCGFT, lesbian comics is defined in the scope notes as comics about the lesbian experience. We always say, is this applicable to Batwoman solely because she's a lesbian character? And is that how our customers are going to seek her out? Not every book she's in focuses on that aspect of her being. So it's just kind of something to think about.
But fans of lesbian characters are going to want to read what she's in, regardless of whether her sexual identity is part of the plot line.
Mm-hmm. Which I think too comes a interesting point about the subjects versus genres, and you know, being able to accurately describe characters using library subject headings that we have access to becomes very tricky, especially if you're trying to mass catalog and you don't have time to sit down and read all of them, which is unfortunate. It's not what we do every day, I wish.
Subject headings are, you know, trying to introduce the concept of a fixed vocabulary to somebody who's trying to read for pleasure is challenging, and often what we do is we encourage them to look up a book that they already have read and that they like and see what the subject headings are for that, and then just follow that link. But that, as we've seen, is not foolproof either.
Right.
Because not everything is cataloged
And it's even
the way it should be.
it is
or
even
to
harder.
the highest standards, yeah.
There you go.
It's also hard, and there are things about the comic genre that make it harder. For example, Lawrence and I were talking about Batwoman is not always Kate Kane, and she's not always Kate Kane in this universe. So it's not all Batwoman are lesbians, right? So
Well, not
people
necessarily. It's like they may not be the same person from like the same universe, because you could be looking up different Batwoman or a different Kate Kane, but that doesn't necessarily mean one isn't LGBT or another is. It's just more like this may not be the Kate Kane you are looking for if you're searching for this. If your introduction to Kate Kane is through the new CW series featuring Ruby Rose, so you'll be more familiar with this version of Kate Kane as opposed to the version of Kate Kane created by Dick Giordano from like the 1950s, or the 2003 A Mystery of the Batwoman, who was actually 3 different people. Go check it out from Warner Archive.
Right, but for example, if one is looking for superheroes that African American backgrounds or mixed race backgrounds, some Spider-Man are and some Spider-Man aren't, and so you can't just see the name Spider-Man and automatically apply a certain metadata grouping.
That's true. And only one, Peter B. Parker, falls under Spider-Hobo.
And I think too, this brings out 2 personal headings. We use person headings for characters, but we got Captain America, and then we got Bucky Barnes, and there's no Steve Rogers. But Captain America is a mantle. Bucky Barnes is a person who is also Winter Soldier. So, you know, also too, depending on how your customers search for characters in and of itself can be very difficult. And, you know, teaching frontline staff, I've showed the LCGFT and subject heading link data website to all of my public service staff because they go, I can't find this, we don't have anything. Oh, you needed to use Captain America.
And hopefully they won't be searching for Nomad Steve Rogers.
All right, so moving on. So this is from the fandom wiki about superheroes. And I think that we can see from all of the circled headings, sometimes fan-generated metadata is a lot more granular than what libraries can provide. So I think what this really shows is how important it is for us to make our items accessible if we have customers who are looking here.
What this also actually underscores for me is that something that we've been resistant to, which is allowing patron tagging in our OPAC, could work to our benefit. I work in a university. We have a lot of undergraduates. They're quite playful. The notion of what they might decide to tag some of our books with has been what has kept us from activating patron tagging. But I look at something like this and I think, oh my Lord, this would make discoverability of my collection, which, because of both Library of Congress subject headings and Library of Congress classification, cannot be browsed either physically or digitally. There is no way to bring up the entire collection online, and there's no way to see the entire collection in one place. So this would make that browsability, that discoverability so much stronger, but it's opening a door that could have a lot of other things in it.
I will be talking about tagging.
Which is also like when these are open up to the public, that's why moderators and moderation are very important, because otherwise it will become pure chaos.
Yeah, that's man hours that we don't
Uh-huh.
have.
And a last consideration, and it's not one that I as a cataloger like to think about, but I think there are also limitations to what we can do and what we can provide
Yes.
in bibliographic metadata. And sometimes you just have to accept you're not going to be able to provide access to absolutely everything. And you just have to be able to point to supportive things that'll give you more full metadata elsewhere.
Okay, so to keep the presentation moving along, we already talked about this, how we have the lack of retroactive cataloging is always a problem, and I think it's always going to be a problem. So we have two comics here, one that had the new genre heading medical comics and one that did not. And then I think another big problem that we have in libraries and how we catalog is how do we link titles in series? So there's for at least public libraries, we have generally two ways we catalog, either multi-part monograph or series. Either all of your volumes are on one record, or you have volume 1, 2, 3, but then you throw in omnibuses and special editions, and this 30th anniversary edition is one issue longer, and we usually stick all those in a 500 note that isn't always indexed by your OPAC.
Right.
So it's very hard to search. And then we can see here, we have which Superman.
This was Death and Return of Superman.
Yeah, so it was in different individual comics with different titles. So how do we link, all of those are added title headings.
Incidentally, Wikipedia is absolutely indispensable for identifying what is in or not in a series. I use it constantly when I'm trying to figure out what have I bought, what's the difference between Marvel Masterworks and Marvel Essentials? One's in black and white, one's in color. I don't know. It's maddening that you find yourself buying the same material over and over and over again, which displeases me. So this is just, whoever is, God bless fandom, really, for being so attentive to the Wikipedia publication history. God, it's useless.
And you can see all sorts of amazing references. Like they'll point out, like, this is this one thing that in this issue became relevant 10 or 20 issues later. These are the things that also happen in anime and manga, especially, where something may happen at this, like even an early point, and then like 20 or 30 or 200 volumes later, oh look, this became important. That throwaway line became important.
Right, so we have about 15 minutes, just so everyone knows.
Oh, okay.
So foreign language comics, that can be problematic too. I found in my work that when it's translated into English,
Suddenly you get subject headings. Yeah, what a coincidence.
Yep. Yeah.
We have a massive collection of non-translated foreign language comics, and this is the sort of subject heading that we constantly get, just comic books country. Nothing about the content.
It's a placeholder rather than,
Yeah, exactly.
about the
It's just to have something there, I think.
Yeah. So how can libraries counteract some of the limitations of library metadata? For me, at my job, we have the phrase when in doubt, go local, which is not necessarily best for shared bibliographic universe, but we have gotten into the habit of adding a local subject heading for manga to our collection. It's a collection that customers always do a keyword search for, and unless it shows up in a subject, it's not going to show up, which is a problem. So we have done that so that it's added as a genre form heading that they can use the facets to search. You can also use this, if you have book clubs that read about certain topics or read certain books, this is a great way to collect all of those within your OPAC. All right, so let's get to how fans generate metadata. Wikis, social media, memes, cosplays, mashups, and hashtags. I think in the current world of consistent content creation, we just have to pay attention to how the community is describing themselves.
No question.
Does anyone else have anything they want to add about the...
Well, as you can see from the slides up here with like cosplay, Tony Stark is actually a mix of House Stark from Game of Thrones and Stark. This is Deadpool, who's basically canon everything with a mashup of the Marriott carpet making that in existence. That's a mashup of Ghostbusters and Playboy bunny outfits, as known from the Dragon Con Bunny Hutch Party, And that, before it actually came out in Batman Ninja, was a variant of Geisha Harley Quinn.
Oh my God.
So, we have it's interesting too, because fan-generated content can become canon, right? So how do we pick up on these trends early? And I think that we all agree that the hashtag has become a really big kind of flag for what's going to be new, what's going to be next. Amazon Princess, maybe if you're not in the comics world, you wouldn't automatically associate that with Wonder Woman, right?
Or
hashtag
Hawkeye.
or Hawkeye, right? Pizza dog, right? If you're in a room with, someone comes up to your references and say, hey, I want that comic that has Pizza Dog, and you go,
Good luck.
you don't know anything about that, but if you can suss out Hawkeye, but Pizza Dog became such a big hashtag there. 28 Days of Black Cosplay in February, you can go on Twitter and look and see, a specific community and what kind of content they're generating and what they're interested in. And I think that, paying attention to the community is vital in order to project where you're going and know kind of what information is necessary for them. Okay, so what can librarians learn from user-created metadata to make library metadata more useful for patrons? That's too many metadatas in a sentence, I think, even for catalogers. So my library in Austin Public Library, we use BiblioCommons as our discovery tool. And we have utilized tagging, our employees tag, our customers tag. I think we have people who aren't our customers tagging. And we just use it as a way to look at genre, tone, and theme. When I think of tone, I go, what do they mean? Tone doesn't mean much to me as a cataloger. But I can look and see tone is grade level to our customers.
Interesting.
You can see from here, I can't remember which manga I looked up, but 200, half of graphic novels. So they're tagging manga because they can't find it any other way. Hence, we started adding it as a local heading.
Right.
So tagging, is anyone else using tagging in their library for their OPACs?
Wow.
BiblioCommons, yeah.
Wow.
Okay, so what can librarians learn from user-generated metadata? So I think these were kind of how we synthesized, what we kind of talked about in creating this. So guide new library metadata creation, rectify cataloging omissions. We have whole communities of, graphic novels creators who aren't represented in our library catalogs, which is also a big problem. Tailoring cataloging to users' interest, pay attention to trends in the community, and support comics tangent communities like cosplayers and content creators. Anyone have anything else they want to add? All right. So we have about 10 minutes left for questions. If anyone has any questions about metadata, user-generated metadata.
So I'm fortunate in that I got to hire 2 students this year to work on our comics. And one of the main things that we're going to be doing probably this spring is to work on retroactively correcting records. And so I'm really excited about that. And while I was interviewing people, I was explaining how there are tons of students who don't know how to find the manga in our library. And I was explaining it's because it's comic books, strips, etc. You can't. And they're like, that doesn't make any sense. Yes, good. You understand some of the problems. So there's a few fields that I pointed out to them that we're going to be focusing on, like the 08, 505s, 520s, subject headings, and 700s, related fields. And so it's a common question that you might ask a cataloger if you were interviewing them, but how good do you think a record has to be good enough? And especially if you're not something that's necessarily coming in new and you're like, well, I have 400,000 things to get through, but if you're retroactively spending the time and going through things and you have theoretically unlimited student labor or work study students, what do you want for a record to be good enough?
Now this is where it helps to also know how people are looking for comics. If you have people who consistently follow colorists or letters or cover artists, then you want to hammer on the 700s with the relator codes. If you have people who read a lot and they forget what they read, you want to make sure you have the 520 summary notes so they can remember what the heck was in that last one and not read it again.
And,
Yeah,
and I think it's triageable, right?
Yeah.
So I had a Vampirella omnibus,
Yeah.
very thick book. You know, dozens of issues. And as I was cataloging it, I went, oh wow, lots of people, this was early in their career. So maybe, you know, in this book, I wouldn't have added all the creators. Or, you know, definitely add all the issue titles. So it's always this like balancing act, and I think that's one of the beauties of belonging to, say, the OCLC consortium is, you know, even if you can't fully 100% Library of Congress catalog a record, you can make sure that your customers can look at it and set that up. So for me, it's all of your creators, editors I usually will. Editors are not as
Crucial.
public
Sorry,
librarians,
editors.
you know, not quite as crucial until they become famous like authors or colorists. Then you go, oh, I wish I would have added them back then. So that subjects, and for me, just making sure that it's accessible. Like I always say, the code word for manga in libraries is comic strips, books, etc. Japan translations into English.
Oh, nice.
And everyone forgets that, so feel bad.
And the funny part about that is, especially as more fans are getting introduced to different ways and it goes through media and marketing, they're not going to think of it like that. They will think of it under the manga title or the anime title, which is also why you see them generally separated out, even in like, you know, Netflix and Hulu and things like that. So that's the kind of categorization that the people who will be coming into your libraries, especially for the first time, might think about something, because they may be used to it from a different method than the way it's been categorized over time. So I think the most important thing is that people can find what they're looking for overall. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah, I will say one of the things that, if we remember that Bleach slide from a while back, I always tell catalogs to look and see how the previous items had the title set up, because otherwise you have things where volume is spelled out in 7, and so it's all the way down and out of order, and then the 14 didn't have edition in the title, and then 2 was hidden in the multi-volume set. And a lot of users at past public libraries have come in and they want Batman Detective Comics 3. And so you have to make sure it's there.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about classification.
Yeah, we had a situation where Josh Dysart's Queen and Country, we had multiple volumes, and I discovered that like 2 of the volumes had the cutter of Q for Queen and Country, but one of the volumes had the cutter of D for Dysart, so they had not even put them all together. And
that co-location's not working.
Yeah, that's not working. And when I wrote that article for Publishers Weekly a decade or so ago about my bitching about Library of Congress classifications, I pointed out that IDW's Dick Tracy reprints and IDW's Little Orphan Annie reprints, one of them had been cataloged in the PN 6700s and one of them had been cataloged in the NCs. They're both reprints, they're both newspaper strips, they're both adventure, they're both from the same time period. So what drove those to go 2 different places? And I spoke to a friend of mine at Library of Congress who's not a cataloger, she's a curator, and she said, well, you know, the catalogers don't all work. It's like they get these huge shipments and things are portioned out, so you don't necessarily have the same cataloger working on subsequent things. And my response is, so what? I mean, don't they just look up to see if there's an existing record? And
Yes.
Sorry, I get really
We tend to be passionate.
yeah.
All right, so we have 5 more minutes. Does anyone, we could talk about this for another 4 hours
So
if you
long.
really let us. So does anyone else have any questions or
problems that you faced at your
Yeah.
institutions with discoverability?
Go for it.
Well, I was just thinking about something that they were talking about this morning in the Blue Age conversation, that, I mean, you guys are fighting the publishers. Are you know, is anybody institutionally on our side pushing back, saying, you have to give us better things to work with? I mean, is anybody making that effort to say, Marvel, you're not giving us things to make us do our jobs?
let me tell you, if I could get sewn bindings so that graphic novels could check out more than once before falling apart. But it's a difficult,
It's a challenge.
difficult uphill battle.
You know, LC stopped cataloging certain foreign language books, and now we rely on cataloging copy that comes from the publisher. And the publishers understand our system to a degree, but Casalini, who's our Italian language vendor, sends us things with cataloging copy, but it's not necessarily useful, and it's not necessarily going to conform to these new genre headings and new classifications and headings that have been added. So, you know, you saw in that same panel, right, that Joe Schmidt from the Department of Education said, when are you guys going to add pagination?
Yeah.
You know, that's something that anybody who teaches with comics has hit this moment where you say to your students, okay, turn to page, and then you just stop dead because there's no freaking page number. So you have to hold the book up and say, this is the page I want you to find. And, you know, some of them have digital, you know, they've got the PDFs, and so the page numbers don't, you know, somebody says, oh, it's this page here. They find a page number, like maybe every 4th page has a page number, or it's irregularly paginated. But the PDF has numbers that are by the image, not by the page, and it's just chaos. Paginate your frickin' book.
You know, that's something Comixology might be able to help with for if they use teaching methods.
That's only for digital.
Yeah.
And I think too, I had thought. Ordering cycles too. Small print runs. Small print runs, you know, you'll get a book and you'll have it on order and then it gets canceled, or, you know, they only printed a certain amount of copies, your 2 are damaged and you can't buy any more. So I think there's a big supply and demand in the library field that needs to be addressed as well.
Bookfinder.com is your friend.
Yeah. All right, we're at 3:13, so one more question.
2 questions. One, how do other countries do all this that have had traditions much longer? And for example, for OCLC, is there a way that a user can go in and pull up all the different versions of that record by all the different libraries to see all the different subject headings and then pick and choose whatever works for them?
Actually, I often go to WorldCat to do my searches because there are records that have better subject headings than the ones we've downloaded to our OPAC. So you can, one of the sometimes frustrations of using WorldCat is that you search for a title and 17 records come up and it's all the same book because people have cataloged it differently. So yes, there is a way. They're all just right there. But going through those 17 records to see which is the one that has the best cataloging.
Also, my question, I guess the question would be that for like the Library of Congress record that most people are going to use, you know, CLC.
Maybe.
Can you see how those 200 plus libraries that have pulled that have added their local
Not
specific?
always, no.
Because they would need to belong to like Z3950.
Or somehow use World Share, or, you know, some libraries have their stuff up, but sometimes it's just how they fix it
Local
locally.
headings sometimes just stay local.
Yeah.
And for the international aspect too, I think one of the things I look a lot at French comics. And, you know, the French culture has embraced comics for a very, very long time. So they have no problem treating them like books and having, you know, really robust headings. So, you know, I think sometimes it's a cultural aspect as well that, you know, I was at a panel earlier that talked about the UK and their legal, you know, deposit.
Right, yeah.
Right?
So interesting.
It's a different flow for having your items depending on what country you're in and what the purpose of their national library is. So I think the standards vary greatly.
Absolutely.
Okay, does anyone have any last comments that they're desperate to get out? Oh, we're so happy that you're here. Nice catalog.